And I know that when you were at the New York Stock Exchange, you started some boot camps for people who were entrepreneurs who were looking at IPO.
Yeah, I worked. I was in charge of the many different jobs that I had at the New York Stock Exchange. One of them was responsible for all of the capital raising that would happen globally. And so I worked with companies from all around the world, 60 different countries where we supported listed companies, and worked with entrepreneurs that had ideas and wanted to be able to eventually have access to the global capital markets. And so while I typically would see them at the start of their journey as public companies, all of them at some point in time made a leap forward and started a business, whether that was, somebody who started something in their garage to something they inherited. I met, teachers, doctors, mechanics, people that came up with ideas that became big, massive, multi-billion-dollar companies because at some point they had the courage to execute on an idea they had. And that's, quite frankly, the formation of the capital society that we operate in today.
And while you were doing that, did you see any or notice any defining characteristics of those type of people that maybe had an idea and executed on it well?
Courage. A lot of courage. It's probably the most difficult thing to do because, starting a business, there's not, a path that you're following. It's not footsteps that you're just, put your head down and march forward. You've got to blaze your own path. And so I think courage is probably the one word that I would describe almost every entrepreneur. It takes a tremendous amount of courage to be able to step out and do something on your own and make the investment in yourself.
Yeah. And let's say that some of the entrepreneurs in the audience here have a really, really good next couple of years, and down the line they decide to IPO themselves. Is there any advice that you can give them on going of
going public?
Yeah.
Well,
so maybe to ease the pain a little bit.
Yeah. If any of you are lucky to have that type of success, I don't think that's the, I used to, in the New York Stock Exchange, there's this huge boardroom with gilded gold walls, and it's sort of the pinnacle of achievement of the public markets to be able to have one of these breakfasts to celebrate an IPO. And I hosted, literally hundreds of these things. But what I would always say was my advice to that entrepreneur who is actually now going to the public markets, going to go out in front of the world and say, hey, I've just, raised hundreds of millions of dollars. I would essentially just say, welcome to the starting line. And it was true, because all that work, all that effort, kind of didn't matter. You were just getting to a new starting line. So buckle up, you're in for a new ride. So, as much as you'd say, oh, the tremendous success at that point, for all of them, it was exactly the same. They were all standing in front of that line, looking into the future, saying, what is it going to take for us to ultimately be successful?
Yeah.
The race started for all of them right there. And it's an important thing to know that within the first or second quarter, after almost all of those people started, half of them failed to meet their expectations.
When they IPO'd.
From the IPO, the first and or the second quarter after making it to that point. Yeah. So, it's an incredible process to go through that, and then an incredible process to succeed even beyond that point.
Yeah, wow. So now that we're at the New York Stock Exchange and we're kind of on the topic, what, I guess, happened in your 9 years there?
Yeah, it's one of the oldest and largest marketplaces in the world. And, I guess I have a theme in my career of running marketplaces. And New York Stock Exchange is a marketplace. It was started by brokers underneath a buttonwood tree in New York trading war bonds. And so it's a place. Marketplaces are platforms that bring a buyer and a seller together at scale. And the New York Stock Exchange had been around for about 200 years when I joined. And I joined part of a team that said, we've got to blow up everything about how this place operates. And it was a place that operated in a very physical, analog world where trading happened, on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange with people. And in 6 years' time, that moved to a world that was largely autonomous, largely machine driven, and went from execution in, several seconds to microseconds.
Right.
I mean, just the amount of technological transformation over that 6-year time periods. And by the way, that was through the worst financial crisis globally and coming back out of that. So it's just, I saw an incredible amount of change while there.
Yeah, and I know that you worked a lot while there to kind of bring in technology companies onto the New York Stock Exchange, correct?
Yeah, it's a great story about that. So I was here in San Francisco, technology investment banker, and was recruited to go back to New York, and I didn't even own a suit. I just had been in the tech world. And I remember after I had taken the job, I went to pitch a company to work with the New York Stock Exchange, and this guy who's a well-known person around here in the Valley, he just says, "F you and F the New York Stock Exchange. You were too cool for all of the startups around here. The New York Stock Exchange standards are way too high, and so it's a country club that none of us want to belong to."
It wasn't
anymore.
Tim, right?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
It wasn't. It wasn't. But it was the point that he was making was a right point. Was that at the time, the New York Stock Exchange was reserved for what they viewed and defined as blue chip companies, and with that as a definition, missed Intel, Cisco, Microsoft, Google, all of these companies that became the next great companies because there was this definition of this was the type of company that had to be profitable, had to be big, and so we changed all that.
Did you go around to Google and Apple and Microsoft and all them and pitch them to come on?
I spent most of my time focused on Yelp, LinkedIn, Alibaba, Workday, NetSuite, Salesforce. I mean,
what was the pitch to get them to come on?
It was, we were going through a transformation as a company, and it's just one of the best brands in the world. So how do you take one of these great brands and be a partner and be a part of this exclusive network, but in a different way? And so we became sort of the underdog in every situation, and we went from not having any technology companies list with us to 95% market share in that in that 9-year time period.
It's amazing.
And we literally just swept over the market, but we ended up using this position of a global brand and a global network and the median exposure at the New York Stock Exchange in a way to attract small companies and built our entire brand around entrepreneurship. As much as it was still very blue chip and still very much from that world, we focused on
blue chip, meaning like industrial kind of stuff.
Blue chip, the big, large, companies that you would define as the GEs of the world. The world was changing, and it had to change, and we, supported entrepreneurship, and by so doing, transformed our brand as well. It was a tremendous halo effect to be associated with the companies that were defining what the future of industry was going to look like.
Yeah, and since you were actually in these meeting rooms pitching these people, and they have to do a pitch here later in the in the semester, do you have any kind of tips or tricks that you used to get through it all or get them on board? Or
I think every great meeting has 3 points, and here's what I'm going to tell you: A, B, and C. And then you tell them A, B, and C, and then you tell them at the end that you want their business. I've either delivered or listened to pitches or hiring people, but the people that say, this is what I'm going to tell you, and then you tell them, and then you ask for the business, stand out like you can't believe. There's so few people that have the courage to ask for the
ask
business.
Is the
just ask for the business.
Missing? Wow.
Tell them, but then ask for the business.
Or the money or whatever, the partner.
Ask for it. Just
ask
it's
for
there and take it.
I love it.